Welcome to this week's episode of Success in Women. I'm Linda.
I'm Andrea.
And today, because Remembrance Day is going to be tomorrow, we're actually going to do a video on why we need to teach our kids and ourselves to remember. But before we get started on the episode, Andrea's got her tip for today.
So along those lines, it is Remembrance Day, and we, as it says, we should not forget. And so as parents, we should be teaching our children and the younger generation what it means to celebrate Remembrance Day. So the one thing you should do with your children, like Linda and I did, we made our own little poppies. And a lot of people can't get out, or they can't find them. They've missed them at the grocery store. I mean, you never know. So we had some red construction paper I always have on hand with my grandson, which I will be doing poppies with him. And we just went online, little video, how to make your own poppy, and voila. It's not perfect, but it's fun.
And you know what? By including the younger generation, the younger people, this actually will mean more, because while you're making the poppies, you could be talking about the significance of the poppy.
Exactly.
And so that leads us into Remembrance Day, and especially at a time right now when the world is a little bit upside down with the different wars going on. But we enjoy our freedoms today because of what our families, our friends, our neighbors have sacrificed for us. And Andrea actually has personal, I'll say, history because of her own father. And she's going to talk about that and show you a few pictures that have come, I'll say, from his time in the service.
Right. And that's the thing we must remember. It's the people before us that sacrificed. We're running around free, complaining about this, complaining about that. They didn't have that luxury. My father and his brother enlisted when they were 14 years old.
Wow.
Do you know?
Did they lie?
They lied about their age.
Wow.
But they have the pictures of the day, and I don't have those particular pictures with me. The pictures that they were accepted into the Merchant Marines. That's what my father and his brother did. And they were both their age, and it's funny because I don't think they cared at that time because the war was on.
Yeah.
And they had the year they were born underneath. And clearly you can tell they're 14 and 15 years old.
Oh.
And they were assigned on a ship.
Wow.
Now their uncle was a cook on that ship. So whether he had some influence, I don't know. But I'm telling you, they did it out of, honor and whatever, but also necessity. Back in those days, there was no work. They had no food on the table. So their other older brother was in the army, so they decided to go.
I know with my father, he actually tried, and he had something physically wrong with him. Now, if you looked at my father, you would think he was totally normal, but they did give you a physical, and there were certain types of situations where they just wouldn't accept you if you had. And my father happened to have that, and so unfortunately he wasn't able to serve in the military.
Sorry, I'm just going to reach down. I have a few pictures here that I would like to show. So this one is of my dad.
Oh,
and
good-looking man.
Yeah, he was very good looking, and you can tell he's a little bit of a player here with his little cap on the side. And now he served until, I don't know, I think they served for about 11 years.
Wow.
And they lived in Nova Scotia, so they were always going out of Pier 21. And if anybody's been to Nova Scotia in the last while, they have Pier 21 has become like a museum, and of immigrants and of service. And so what we did was, you were able to buy a brick on the wall. It's an actual brick, and they put in the name of the person, like say if they came in on a ship from Europe, the name of the ship and the year. And then with my father and his brother and his other brother, we bought 3 bricks. and the name of the ship that they served under, the last ship that they served under, in the year. And so this was my dad, and you know, he was very young there. And then this was my uncle. Now, my dad, once he was out, but my uncle always stayed with the veterans. He was in the Canadian Legion. He helped, so he really talked more about his service and his time. My father never wanted to talk about it.
And you
I
know,
don't know why.
It's been a lot of people over the years that I've met that when they've been in the military of any kind, they never want to talk about their time there.
And
I
some
can
do
understand,
and some don't, but I don't.
I can understand though in one way, because if you ever watch movies and stuff, you see the horrors that they actually witnessed. They don't want to relive it, and they don't want their families actually, I'll say, almost living that time that they did, that they sacrificed for all of us. And why this whole show is important on Remembrance Day is because your roots, basically your freedoms that you get to do in your life, have to do with what happened in history. And in some cases, people will always say, that's history, that's the past. No, that past makes you who you are today.
Exactly. And then the other personal figure that we honor on Remembrance Day is my father-in-law. So my father-in-law was from Italy, and he served in the Alpinis. So that was a very prestigious part of the military in Italy. And so it wasn't for the longest of time, but him, his brothers, all my mother-in-law's brother served. And actually my mother-in-law's brother was captured in the war.
Wow.
Yes. And you know, back then nobody knew anything. And he was gone for 5 years. They had no idea that he was alive or not. When the war was over, he just walked into the village one day. He walked all the way from Africa.
Wow.
He was a prisoner of war for all that time. So we have no idea. We have no idea the sacrifice that the men and the women before us, because a lot of those women, they were as quiet as it is. Now it's coming out when you see it online, the part that women played in World War, especially World War II. And
well, also in the factories, they were almost all women that were working the factories,
and they had to give up so much of their personal stuff to send overseas and whatever. And Eddie has a cousin, that
her husband,
my husband, sorry, my husband's cousin from Chicago. He served in Vietnam. Now he's the only one I know personally that served in Vietnam. I knew a lot of draft dodgers because they came to Sudbury a lot, and we had a little drop-in center that they used to come to. We'd feed them whatever and they'd move on. Those were the hippie days, you know. But his cousin who served in Vietnam, oh, what a terrible war that was. And his father was a man of influence, so he used to send packages over there. And this is what you don't understand, what we don't understand, the sacrifice. He said the greatest gift that his father sent to them was a very small blow-up swimming pool.
Oh my God.
They put water in there to wash their feet because their feet were so moldy and full of, you know, different fungus and stuff from walking in those
You
fields.
don't hear that.
You don't hear that. And they treasured that gift.
Wow. I've never even heard that.
Can you imagine?
Before.
And if you have a chance and you're driving in the States somewhere, take your children, or maybe they have them in Canada, I don't know. We only were traveling down to Florida when our kids were small. And you stop at these museums where they have the warships, they have the warplanes, they have carriers. And we took our children through those. They actually let you walk through them. And when I saw that for myself, especially one submarine, that the beds were on chains hanging, and they were from bunks, and they, like, the guy could probably touch the guy above him with his tongue. That's how they slept.
It was tight. I know. I've been in them as well.
Yes. And if you think, like our generation, who those were our parents, we're tough on our kids. Well, now you know why. They think that, they complain about this, complain about that. Well, those men saw real sacrifice, real suffering. And so we need to remember that. We really do. And we need to teach our kids and pass it on.
And you don't have to agree whether or not the war was right or the war was wrong. The fact is and was, there was a war.
And there always will be.
And there always will be.
Always will
so
be.
It's not a matter of agreeing, but the fact is, if these men didn't go and sacrifice for us, we wouldn't have the freedoms today. We wouldn't have any of the choices of how we live or what we want to do with our lives.
No.
And sometimes, it's easy to overindulge your children because you feel like, well, you got deprived or maybe your parents got deprived. But the fact is, you're not doing them a service because they need to grow up strong.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know when we're going to be, I'll say, having to put ourselves in a position. And I'm not talking about Andrea and myself now at this age. What I'm talking about is your children, your grandchildren.
Because who knows what's coming?
Exactly. Who knows?
And they better have tougher skins,
Yeah.
or at least know that a possibility that they might have to defend their country, defend their freedom, and
even going,
be prepared.
Andrea, we did we did a tour in Italy. And we saw so many of the Canadians that were over fighting in Italy. And you go through the graveyards, it's like a museum,
France,
but yes.
In France.
Went there as well.
They have a whole thing dedicated to the Canadians. What is it? Vimy Ridge?
Yes.
And the monument is incredible. We went to see it.
Yeah.
And so many Canadians. And as a matter of fact, we had a lady on our bus who found her uncle.
Wow.
On one of the gravestones in France.
There's just so many, and you walk and you see the ages of basically the date of birth and when they passed away, and they were kids. They died really as children and they were serving.
This, in those bunkers underneath the ground with no food.
Oh, we saw some of those as well.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, they really, really did fight for our freedom, and they did it willingly,
they
happily.
Absolutely did.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
Their parents taught them patriotism, like freedom and the importance of it. So when the call came to war, not Vietnam, but before that, they were all ready to fight. My husband says all the time, "Oh, I would have went to war if it was my chance." So teach your kids to love their freedom, love their country, and to
remember.
stand up and to remember. Exactly.
Because they might not always have grandparents, great-grandparents, or aunts, uncles somewhere in the military that they, actually saw live action and want to talk about it.
Right.
But the fact is, you can even ask just about the other things so that it gives them, I'll say, almost this thank you, of they serve for a reason.
Right.
Because unless kids acknowledge that,
right. And Remembrance Day shouldn't just be a day off school for them.
Right.
And that's what it does end up being. So if you have a chance, observe the 11:11 hour on Remembrance Day with your children. If you can, go to a ceremony in your neighborhood where they present the wreaths to some of the soldiers, do that, or even watch them do it on television.
Yes.
And make them observe the reason why they have a day off school. And it's only from 11 o'clock for, well, the silence is short, 2 minutes, but maybe you watch a ceremony for 20 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour of their day.
Yeah.
Just so they remember.
Did you hear about, there's a hospital, and I can't remember if it's in Toronto or Oakville or whatever, but people had gone, because there were a lot of military people in this particular hospital, older people that were still alive, but living there now. Anyway, they put outside on Remembrance Day a whole field of, I think it was flags and poppies and whatever, and got them to look out the window. It was like so emotional, I can't even tell you, but it meant so much to know they were appreciated. I get emotional.
I know. We don't know. We have no idea how they sacrificed, and and what those men could have contributed to society had there not been a war.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what I feel now, what's going on now in the world. So many young men dying for what, you know, and it's scary.
It is. But that's our episode. It's short, sweet, but we just don't want you to forget. And the whole idea of the poppy was written by a Canadian, the poem. And, you know, take your time, Google it, read the poem, see what it was all about. There is a reason. And the poppies were, when this Canadian wrote it, poppies growing everywhere among the soldiers and the graves. And
it's a true symbol.
Yeah, it really is a true symbol. And take the time. Teach your kids well. Anyway, I'm Linda.
I'm Andrea.
We hope you like,
share,
and subscribe, please. 2 thumbs up. We'll see you next week.